All right, folks, it's time for the radio show. As Mark Lee once again. It is a Monday afternoon, and definitely a lot of people are paying attention to the Sweet 16 and basketball and all along those lines. I know that my alma mater made it to the Sweet 16, so Marquette will be playing North Carolina State just down the road in Raleigh, as I am in Durham, and seeing how far they advanced. Both UNC and Duke made it, as did Clemson. So definitely a lot of folks are there. Also, Connecticut and a number of other teams. So there are 16 teams vying for that championship now, and we started off with 64, actually 68, since we did have those play-in games as well. But now it's down to the Sweet 16, and we'll see what happens in that regards. Had the pleasure yesterday of going to visit a good friend of mine who is in the space of poetry, and he is an amazing writer and a social activist, and all along those lines. So Dasana Hanu was releasing his new book, and I know that my guest today will be talking about prose and some of the things that she does in that space. But he has written a new book, and actually his mom recited a poem that I think when his friend Blues had done for him as well, just talking about how she didn't know when he had changed his name from Dion to Desan, but also sharing how much she was proud of him and all along that line, because he is definitely the poet laureate, I believe, for the Piedmont region, if I remember correctly, and he's definitely been a slam coach and has done a lot of other things, including being a hip hop fellow, and I believe that was at Yale and everything in that way. So definitely some great things that he was doing, and he had some amazing artists, whether that was Ashley, who has been a member of the slam team, or Ebony, I believe is the young lady's name, or even Reverend Kenny. They came out there and gave a sermon that was kind of a salute to him as well. And we may be seeing some of that airing here on the network as well later on, since I did have permission to show that and live stream it. So I might grab that and put it here on the network in the not too distant future and all in that space. But definitely it was great to see him there and to see him getting those accolades and honors. And of course, he's got a play coming up and a number of other things that are coming up as well. So definitely it'll be quite interesting to see what goes on in that space and what goes on in that sense of what is going on with his uh, writing and all along those lines. But I do know that my guest today, Patricia Wilson, is a writer and a prose writer and has done a number of other things as well. So we're going to bring her on and learn more about the things that she's got going on. And then maybe she's even competed in poetry slams as well, but probably not. But we're just going to see how she got involved in the world of prose writing and some of the things that she's got going on. So how are you doing, Miss Wilson? And how is life treating you? Like I said, that was yesterday that they did the event called Dirt Church, which was a salute. And I think that's the title of his latest book, because he actually frames these poems with biblical references. So I think he does a biblical passage, and then there might be a poem that is tied into the biblical passage and all along those lines. But as I said, Desan is very much of a prolific writer and has been writing for quite some time. I want to say he's in his early 50s, early to mid 50s or something like that. But definitely has been having great accolades as a writer and as a community activist as well. So I did see that you were a prose writer, and I know you've been on the show before. If you want to share a little bit about some of the things that you've got going on and some of the things that you are doing, even in that prose writing space.
Well, I started off as prose, but then my friends convinced me to move it to poetry because I write children's books. So I started with a little book called I Am Amazing.
Hmm.
And it was just a little guy. It's just a little book here. And when I wrote it, it was just a series of affirmations that sort of fell through my mind one morning when I got up after dealing in a counseling office with a kid who had tried to end her life, and she came to me as a counselor, and I tried to get her to say I like myself, and she stormed out of the office. And that night, my son phoned and talked about my first grandchild, and said she's so amazing, she's so amazing. And the next morning, I woke up, and three books came into my head. The first was I Am Amazing. The second, We Are Amazing. And the third was Life is Amazing. It took me 16 years to write the books, and they're tiny books. But to try to make things rhyme is as the challenge, as I know your other guest understands, because you have to really work with the endings of each line. And then I wrote a book called When Grandma Giggles. It's just a laughter book, just to try to raise people's frequency. And then I wrote My Magical Nightmare, which is a book that teaches kids to change their dreams and make a good ending. You know, make an ending where they feel brave when they wake up instead of disempowered. So those are the 5 books that I have written in the last 14 years. I don't have the accolades. I don't have any awards or anything, but I've had a lot of fun. I've sold 20,000 books just to schools and people I know.
It sounds amazing and everything.
Nice for me.
What do you say to folks who, sometimes, and I know that even at the Hayti Center where I work at, and I'll be going there later on this evening and everything, we have a quilter circle, and there are some people in their 70s and 80s that are part of that quilter circle. I know some dancers that are in their 70s and 80s and still dancing, but you wrote some of these books when you were later in life and everything. So what do you say to folks that are like, oh, I'm too old to write. I can't write a good book and all along those lines. So what is your answer to them? Because it sounds to me that you really didn't get totally into the writing till later in life.
Well, I'm 75 now. So I was, 60 when I started. I was almost before 60 when I started. And the books evolved as I evolved, because when I wrote I Am Amazing, my life was in a certain place. Mm-hmm. And I was able to, repeat I am amazing 5 times and I can 14 times because I really was working with tons of little kids who had low self-esteem. Right. And I thought that if they could start with the beginning book that just changed their self-talk, it would help. It took me a number of years before I could write We Are Amazing because I was a bit jaded by the news, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. And so I had to sort of go into a guidepost reality, thinking of the things we are amazing, being compassionate, being kind, all those things. And then again, another 5 years to write Life is Amazing. And I finished Life is Amazing during COVID. Wow. And I think that I grew up with the books. And, I was hearing about suicide rates increasing, drug overdoses increasing. And I thought, children are expecting life to be just always good, whether it's the media or what. But when it doesn't meet their expectations, they get discouraged. And in Life is Amazing, I just basically say we get to be here. Life is ups and downs, but that's life. And the gift is that we're here. Right. And that we can do the best we can. And we can write our own story and not be so afraid all the time. And so it was, I would say that you grow up with a book. And very often, if you started at 70 or 80, you've got a lot of experience of your life. I'd never run into a time like COVID. Right. Where they locked down the world. At one point, I figured there was close to 4 billion people in the world on lockdown. Mm-hmm. And you think of that, and the energy of fear is such a low frequency. Mm-hmm. And the kids, I'm talking to counselors who are saying that the children they're working with have got so much more anxiety and depression. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have to do something to help the little jiggers because they're coming up alienated and scared. And it's sort of like a Chicken Little mentality, right. That old fable. It seems like Chicken Little has become the powerful force because it's everywhere. There's fear everywhere. But if you actually go out and go for a walk and see the sky and see a bird and see a tree, and you realize that life is beautiful. Yeah. So it'd be kind of nice to diminish the Chicken Little thinking that I'm noticing pretty much everywhere.
Well, speaking of that Chicken Little lifestyle and everything, and I do remember that book and everything in that span, but I do know, and I don't know if she's still with you, that the first stanza of the poem that you wrote was actually written by your mother, and apparently she had written something called I Am Happy Being Me when she was almost 95 years old, so she was almost at the century mark. So I was just wondering, what was it like having that connection to your mom, and how did she help you with your own creative journey? And if you want to share something about that whole notion of I am happy being me.
Well, when I wrote I Am Amazing, Mom was alive, and she had her brain well until 98 and a half. And I had written, I'm happy being me. I love my nose. I love my eyes. I love my color, shape, and size, and so on. And she said, no, no. It should be, I love my eyes. I love my nose. I love myself right down to my toes.
Hmm.
I love who I am. I am happy to be. I am thankful for all the gifts inside me. And then it ends, I will remember my whole life through. I am amazing, and so are you. And so that's how the book ended. And Mom had, really good input into the writing because she was a really good poet, and so she helped with the rhymes.
Yeah. So she helped a lot with that and everything. How important was it for you to have the support of family, whether that was your existing family, whether that's the generation like your mom, or even if you have kids of your own, them and even significant others? So how important was it to have that family dynamic in order to get these books out there?
Well, my eldest granddaughter, who's now 17, was my muse. Look, when she was born, she inspired the book because my son called her amazing all the time. And so that was what inspired it. When she was 5, she was having nightmares. And so I said, well, you can change the ending. And when they wakened in the morning beside her, I said, do you have a nightmare? And she said, no, but I saw a horse, grandma's horse, standing beside our bed. So I wrote The Magical Nightmare for her. And I had written, I see her standing by me, my fingers brush her side. I smell her warmth, I hear her neigh, and I feel, and I said, brave inside. And she said, no, no, Grandma. And she was only 6. She said, no, no, Grandma. It's I feel safe inside. It's those things, those wonderful understandings from a 6-year-old brain. And then when I said, when I feel sad and start to cry, I imagine her warm hug. And she said, no, no, Grandma. I think it should be when I feel hurt. And she was really kind of an important muse. Grandma Giggled was inspired by both my grandkids and my daughter-in-law. Yeah, so and she is now 17, my granddaughter, and she likes Life is Amazing the best because it sort of speaks to not being entitled, that life, you don't expect life to just give, you have to figure out what you can do to give back. So yeah, she's been there all along, as all my grandchildren. Of course, my little grandsons like When Grandma Giggled, because it's just about laughter and it finishes with a little fart. You know how it is. So you can always get a little guy or a little girl to engage in life when they can laugh.
Oh yeah, definitely can engage that. You had kind of mentioned earlier, and I know the last time you were on here, you mentioned it as well. I know there's been a lot of conversation about our kids and the nature of our kids and all along those lines. I don't have any of my own, but I do have my 2 nephews that'll be um, 15 and 16 this year. One was born 2008, the other 2009. So yeah, they'll be 15 and 16 this August and everything. But I do know there's been a lot of conversation about how they are feeling stressed, and a lot of it is around social media and a lot of other things. But there is even some people that are thinking that they don't want to carry on that kind of I won't say duty or job, but that kind of tradition of even creating their own families and their own lives because they're not sure of what this world will be leaving them and everything. Because I know that I've talked to some young people even in their 20s and 30s, and I think there was one that I talked to recently that might have been in his late 30s. He was like, and I think that he said that he and his wife had decided not to have children because if they decide to have them, they will foster them because of how expensive kids can be and all in that space. But I just wanted your thoughts about the nature of our young people and what they are facing, because you just mentioned the pandemic, but depending on when they were born, they might have also faced 9/11 and a couple of other things as well. So I was just wondering your thoughts around just the nature of society, and particularly when it is concerning our young people.
Well, again, I talked to my granddaughter last weekend, and she said that she's grade 12, and she said a lot of the kids are just shut down emotionally. I think that when you get this contagion of fear, which has been pervasive in 4 years, that kids will just distract their minds, and they emotionally just shut down. Like she says they're not trying much in school. They're not completing projects. They skip school. It's I think it's killing their motivation because they're not sure what they want to live for.
Right.
And if something could change their motivation to inspire them to get up and make a difference, because they can,
Yeah.
they can make a huge difference. I, I'm, yeah.
Yeah.
You sort of wish that, and I really believe if you start them young and get them into reading little books that are really positive, and just get them to sort of remember who they are. Because when they come in this world, I don't know, Mark, if I've seen quite a few little babies born, and they come in as such magic, just so perfect, and they don't have any particular fear in them, nor do they have courage in them. They're little beings.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't cultivate courage in children,
Right.
then they're going to be really subjected to what I call the fear contagion. And when children are fearful, they're going to shut down. Fear is a very passive emotion. It's just like they're going to quit trying. They're going to get into things that, like drugs and stuff, to just take away their fear thoughts. I don't know. I have a lot of concern about what's going on. I also have a lot of optimism.
Mm-hmm.
As a grandma, I can see a lot of kids that are sort of saying, no, this isn't for me. And there's a whole bunch of grassroots developments to get people back to being in nature, not living in a social media world. And I think that I will never be a pessimist. I got grandchildren. I think that that's a wormhole for us to fall into, because we need to, again, like we have to cultivate the higher frequencies. Fear and anger and shame and guilt and all those things are really low frequencies in our world, and we have to cultivate joy and togetherness and trust, integrity. All the higher, they make you feel better even when you hear the word.
Mm.
So I think that we have, as a society, I think we really need as a society to focus on the kids, because they're getting the fear a lot from their parents, even if they're not understanding. I mean, the parents are watching the news. The parents are, and they're passing it on to little children, often pre-verbally. The little kids can understand that, the feeling, the vibration. They can understand it really young. Now, how do you think about that?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Everything you mentioned about Mother Nature, and I'm a big proponent of Mother Nature. Sometimes just enjoy watching something simple like the birds or even the rabbits and other things that can be here, even in North Carolina. So, how important has it been for Mother Nature for you, and also to cultivate that love of nature in your own family?
Well, I was born in 48, so the world was really different, and I was born in a small town. So we were always out in nature. Like, we didn't have TV till I was grade 12. So we were always out running around, in nature. And I I had to have a hip replacement about 8 years ago. And man, nature is my healer. Like, it just glues me together when I'm kind of needing sort of that wonder glue. I go for a walk.
Right.
And I couldn't with my hip. I just couldn't make it out. And it was just like a double, it was double whammy. I just like, but I got over it and I healed. And now I walk every day. I've got a little lab. Well, she's 3. So I get out for a couple hours every day. And my children and grandchildren they're all really, they have habits of getting out and getting out into a nature area. Even the cities have tremendous parks now. You can find a place to go. Even you can go in a backyard and create a little space under a tree. But to me, it's everything. How about you?
Not the same. I enjoy getting out there and enjoying nature and all along those lines. Like I said, don't do it as much as I used to, but there's a little pond area that's not that far from the uh, apartment where I live at, and I need to get back to walking there because you might even stumble across a turtle, and there are definitely geese and other birds that are there, and there's oftentimes swimming around. So just sometimes that a little bit of quiet time, even though there's a major road that goes by it, so you still hear the traffic go by, but it's still very good and calming, and not that far from where I live is Duke Garden, so that can be just fun to walk around because it is a botanical garden that is open to the public and everything. It can definitely be soothing and calming, and it's not that far from a couple of museums that you can also go visit after you've done your walk or even before you've done your walk. But yeah, just being out in nature can be a very positive thing. I'm also a big fan of having ancestral ties, and I was wondering your thoughts around that because I definitely believe in being connected to the ancestors even after they have joined the ancestral grounds. As a matter of fact, a dear friend of mine just recently lost, I think it was about a day and a half ago, her mother and everything. Ironically, I had seen her that same day at a concert celebrating women artists and just women in general. And she had told me that she didn't think her mother would be there that much longer. And I think it was later that day or later that night that I learned that the mother had passed on. But how important do you think it is to have that spiritual connection and those connections to those that have been here before you were here?
I think it's very important. I think it's so important. I was working. The last two people I worked with were friends of mine who actually made the choice to do medical assistance in dying because the drugs they were taking weren't working to keep their discomfort away. Really, again, an amazing education. But I also do Reiki, and at one point, my friend, she had Parkinson's, and she rarely could lay still. And in the session, she was so quiet. I thought, whoa, what's going on? And when she came back, she said that she felt as if someone had reached down into her being and lifted her spirit up. And she was with her dad. And her dad was the only relative whom she was close with who had died. And she spent the whole session with her dad and came back and was able to tell me how it inspired her to have no fear about dying. And so she was able to do that process with such peace and such confidence. I believe that energy lives on and spirits live on, and our connection to our generations is always there. I guess you feel the same.
No, I definitely feel that same way that that energy lives on. I know that even though she passed when I was younger in my 20s, that I still feel connected to my grandmother, who was very much in the library field. So some of my love of reading and love of creativity, I know I got from her and all in that space. So definitely, and there were other relatives that passed on, including one that passed away relatively young. I think that Sarah was probably in her 30s when she passed away in childbirth and everything. But definitely, those are some folks that I still feel connected to, even though they have gone on into the ancestral grounds. And oftentimes, even when friends lose a loved ones, like I told Miss Yvonne yesterday, and everything, I do sometimes feel that they are guiding us as angels from up high and everything. So I do sometimes think that they are letting us know that they are still watching what we are doing until we make that journey ourselves and everything. But that's just some of my philosophies and everything because I don't consider myself overly religious and more spiritual because I sometimes think that our churches, not saying all churches, but quite a few of them get caught up in the politics of
Yeah.
personality and not necessarily the politics of the messaging and all along those lines. But that's just kind of my personal opinion about spirituality versus religion.
Yeah, mine too. We share the same thoughts.
Yeah. I know that one of the other things that you talked about, at least I had seen this in Goodreads and everything, and I'd love to hear this story. But there was a young lady who was an artist. I guess she was an artist with one of your books, and you talked about her illustrations and the nature of the illustrations. Could you share a little bit about this young lady named Tanya and your relationship with her? Because it does look like she did some stuff in the medium and the acrylic, and you were just kind of like sharing some of y'all's
So,
like-mindedness.
can you see this little figure, or is it too shiny?
No, I see it. Yes, I
Okay.
see it.
Okay. Well, she I didn't even know she was an artist, and I
Hmm.
had written this book, I Am Amazing, and I was asking friends and family, because they were a number of artists in my family, if they could do it, but they weren't interested.
Right.
And Tanya knew my daughter because she took Pilates from her. She was a school counselor and still is a school counselor. And so she actually asked if she could read the script when I was out of town, and my daughter gave it to her. And she approached me and she said, "Could I illustrate your book?" Well,
Okay.
nobody even knew that she was an artist. And so a year and a half later, she came up and she had all these little figures, little black ones and red ones and yellow ones. You know, she had little figures. They were all dressed. They had little dresses and pants and little shoes. And she presented her her figures to me. It was unforgettable. And I stood there and I said, "Oh, thank you." And she said, "Can I do it again?" And I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Okay." And she took it back and she decided that she didn't want to develop figures that had any gender or
Mhm.
any class difference, any color difference, any size difference. So all of her little figures are these little beings. I call them little soulkins because I figure we're all related. We're only one species, and we all have a soul. And the children love these little pictures because they can identify. And I think actually what you're looking at is
Mhm.
the essence of anybody, whether you're an adult or a child. And Tanya captured it. So she would take her easel and she'd put her paper on it and she'd read a stanza and then she'd paint the background and then she would wait until until a figure emerged from the paper, from the colors, much like the wood carvers,
Mhm.
where they take a piece of wood and they 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 find the image in it and bring it into being. That's what she did, and she did all three of the books. I Am Amazing, We Are Amazing, and Life is Amazing.
Wow. Speaking of being amazing and everything, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, but I'd love to hear your thoughts because, this is a very divided time, particularly here in the United States. I think y'all have had some division there in the Canada. And some people love your prime minister, other people not as much so in everything. But there are some folks who would say that most of us are amazing, most of us have amazing abilities, but that there can be this force of negativity or force of uh, non-positivity, for lack of a better term, and some people even call it forces of evil and everything. So I guess the question I have for you is, because I did notice that you say that everybody is amazing, is can we find amazingness in even the most outright people that have to what some folks might say are non-redeeming qualities? So is it possible for us to find amazingness in Putin, or if we want to go back in history, to find amazingness in Hitler or Mussolini or some of these other folks, even Idi Amin in Uganda, that didn't necessarily have the greatest tradition? And I'm sure that the folks in Ukraine are trying to find amazingness in Mr. Putin and everything. But can we find amazingness in folks that are doing non-amazing things?
Well, I truly believe that when they started out, when they were born into this world,
Mhm.
they were amazing. And I think that it is our essence. Like in my second book, I said, we are amazing. It's our essence at birth,
Right.
the treasure within us through our time on earth. And I believe all of us have that amazing essence. However, I think that many of us, even with childhood abuse and childhood experiences, get layered with the negativity, and we get like I've never taken the time to study Hitler's early years, or
Right.
anybody's early years to know what the story was that led them to their behaviors. But when I do inner child work in hypnotherapy, like you do really uncover a lot of the things that little children are subjected to, that they carry throughout their life, and it affects them in every angle. And I'm not I'm a realist. I don't think that if you take I mean my books get criticized. I had a teacher say, "Yeah, you're just creating narcissists by having I am amazing." So I mean I've had the criticism, but she hadn't read the last words, "I am amazing and so are you," which was more at our core we are amazing, and we have to learn to find the amazing in whoever we're talking to.
That makes sense. You mentioned earlier, and you think you mentioned the last time you were on as well, being in that hypnotherapy space. And I do know that some people are glad to solve their problems through hypnotherapy and hypnotism and all along those lines. But there are a number of people, and I actually had the pleasure not that long ago of interviewing here on the network, the amazing Kreskin, who made a career out of being
Yeah.
a
Oh wow.
mentalist and everything along those lines. But do you sometimes find that people are sometimes apprehensive about being hypnotized? Because I do know that sometimes people are afraid that you might make them run around as a chicken or make them say something that they didn't mean to say. Because a lot of times we can be very conscious about what we are saying, and sometimes being overly cautious about what we are saying. Because I've even seen that in relationships where people will sometimes be a little like on hands and knees, kind of on their toes in terms of what they want to say, because they're afraid that they might say the wrong thing and everything along those lines. But I just wonder, have you had people that have given you pushback because they are apprehensive of being hypnotized?
Well, I'm the number one person with apprehension. I saw the Great Ravine when I was a kid,
Right.
and there was no way I was going to be hypnotized. And then in my 5th year university, I was taking my master's in counseling, my 4th year in university, I think, 5th, I guess. Anyways, I was taking my master's in counseling, and the professor invited me up to the front to be hypnotized, not knowing that I was resistant beyond belief. And he also had a woman whom he had been working with called Jackie. And he was doing things like lower your arm is heavy. And I was looking over at Jackie because he was behind me, and I was putting my arm down and down. And I was listening to his words, and he was teaching the class as he was inducing hypnotic state. And I was resisting.
Mm-hmm.
And after about 10 minutes, he said, you can go. He said, there's only 2 types of people who can't be hypnotized: retarded people, people who lack imagination. And in the 70s, that was a word that was used. And so I sat down, and I knew I wasn't retarded. And I heard that when I was actually in a brainwave state, and it planted a seed. And I didn't even know it had been planted. But if you had said, shut your eyes and see an apple, I couldn't. 20 years later, when I became single again, I went to a session with Lee Poulos, an amazing hypnotherapist. And I had put my single mom, I put all my money into this course. And the first night we got on our mat, we had to shut our eyes, and we had to be by the ocean and hear the ocean and smell. And after 20 minutes, I was almost in tears. And he came up and said, "What's wrong?" One of the best teachers I've ever had. Wow. And I said, "Well, I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. I couldn't smell anything, And he said, "That's okay. Some people don't hear, or see, or smell, but you can just think it.
Wow.
Think it. Just think it." And I went to bed that night, and I came back the next day and lay down on the lap, and he asked us to shut our eyes and see an animal. And I saw our little horse, Misty, a little white horse. And she sprouted her wings, and I flew Pegasus for the rest of the weekend. But that showed me, and after that, I was reading how careful you have to do when you use your words. So every word I choose in a child's book, I make sure that it's a conscious choice.
Speaking
And
of,
if you don't, you can plant, you can plant thoughts that will hurt a kid's brain. So I
I
don't
think,
do hypnosis. I
mhm,
do hypnotherapy, and it's a totally different thing because you work with the client and you ask the client to tell you what they want, and then you just create a safe space so they can get there and do their work. So I never hypnotize anybody. I just basically get them into a relaxed state where they can talk to a deceased one, or um, go back in time to find something that might be giving them a limiting belief. I have I have a great resistance to hypnosis myself.
mhm.
That's
Speaking
a,
of that limited belief and all along those lines, I know that during the height of the pandemic, so maybe in the year 2021, 2022, a little bit and everything, I was involved with a group called the Funky Eye Puppets that IPC put together. I actually need to get back in touch with IPC, but he was a George Lucas disciple, and he had these different folks, myself included, that created this audio troupe, and he had a children's book because he was creating this whole children's narrative that he had and everything, because definitely there were several books that he had put out there that were his books that were all about this fictional land that he was creating, and definitely doing this kind of stuff that he's hoping to make into movies and a number of other things. But I know that one of the things he did is that a lot of times when we get into that space of wanting to be involved in life, meaning adult life, we sometimes forget the wonderment of childhood. And I know that one of the things that IPC used to talk about all the time is that we had to get out of our head and go back to enjoying childlike wonderment, and be not afraid to play characters and to do voices that might have seemed childish to those that were listening and everything. So I just wanted your take on that, because I do think that sometimes once we get to adulthood, we don't do as much of the fun things as we used to do when we were kids and all along the span. And I get it. Everybody as an adult has to pay their bills and has these different adult responsibilities. But I think one of the things that IPC was pushing us to was to understand that there is childlike wonderment, and that we should try to maintain at least some sense of it even in our adult years. But I was just wondering your take on that, and whether you agree with IPC that that's something we need to do more of, is having this kind of childlike wonderment.
oh man, I think the play is so important.
Mhm.
Like just play, that happiness, that laughter. I think it's so important, and to become uncomfortable. And when you're uncomfortable with a whole bunch of other people that are uncomfortable, it becomes hilarious. And so
Right.
you can, and laughter to me frees our spirit. Like you can be with a group of strangers, but laughter is such a joining force, because you get such you got such a beautiful feeling when you belly laugh, that you just you're all joined because it's funny. I'm not talking sarcasm or nasty humor. I'm talking the true humor that just comes from within. Like the other day, I was sitting around with three women, and we're all in our 70s or late 60s. And one woman said to the other, "Oh, you look like you're 18." And the other one said, "Yeah, give or take 50 years." Well, you don't usually get to hear that comment. And it was a true comment. And just that laughter at ourselves and our laughter and play. I know, I think he's doing a wonderful, I look forward to seeing. I,
Mhm.
I would like you to email me
Yeah, I'll email you his information and the contact information. I was actually seeing if I had one of the books laying around before we ended another 30 minutes or so. If I've got it laying around, I'll bring up the cover and everything. But I was seeing if I had one immediately accessible, but I didn't see it right in front of me and everything. But you mentioned something that it was fascinating to me as well. My dad's other half, and she's probably in her 70s as well as I'm in my um, early 60s. I think he's either late 70s or early 80s and everything. And they've been together longer than he was with mom and everything. But she is a dancer and a dance critic. And I know that she's done some dance performances, as one recently as I want to say last year. So she's still dancing even at her age and everything. And I've got some friends that are part of a cheerleading squad that's
Oh,
here, and it's mostly senior cheerleaders. And then there is the quilt circle that meets at the HI Center, which I alluded to earlier, and met quite a few of those are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. And then there's the Raging Grannies, which I think has chapters all over the
yes.
country and in Canada, which is
Okay.
some protest folk singers. And I want to say most of those folks are in their 70s and 80s as well. So I just wondering your take on should we still trying to be doing performing later in life? Because I think that I always get inspiration when I see folks. I mean, one of my favorite blues singers, I think he's retiring this year, is in his 80s. But the last time I saw Buddy Guy perform, he was still having more energy than some 20-year-old performers that I have seen as well. So I just wanted your take on um, artists that are in their silver years still performing.
Oh, I think it's fantastic. Like, I don't want to ever retire, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to be engaged in life. I don't want to be like so many people disengage and they check into some sort of a nursing home when they're like my mother-in-law
Mm-hmm.
died at 99 and she
Wow.
was making cookies and baked goods for members of her community who were in the care home who were in their 60s. And I just think there's a choice. Do you want to be engaged in life or do you want to just sit around and sort of let life live you or do you want to live life? You
No, I
know,
mean,
do you engage or do you say no, I'm going to contribute? Oh, I think it's I wish I could sing. Oh my.
but
That's
along those same lines and everything, because one of the things that frustrates me, and it's not just folks in their 70s or 80s, and I'm not saying that these institutions aren't necessary, because
oh
in some
there.
cases they are necessary and everything, but I do sometimes think that we as a society, particularly a Western society, are sometimes too quick to be people in nursing homes and in some nursing homes and in some elderly care centers. There are different levels. Some of them
Oh,
are more
100%.
engaging, and they engage the residents, and they get the residents to go to plays and stay active in whatever might have been their interest, whether that was um, dancing or cooking or even going to events like concerts. But there are some other ones that to me are just like holding cells, if I can use that kind of terminology, because they're not doing enough to engage the people that are going in there. And I think that the people get a little bit frustrated if they are those kind of run ones. And then I don't think that a lot of the people live as long as they probably could live if they were one in a better run one, or if they were one that was, or in an environment that was more encouraging. And like I said, it is levels, and I do know that there are some that are what I just described, more active and are more encouraging of their residents. But I do know that there are some that I've gone to or had friends gone to that it just seemed like they were waiting for that last call, if I can use that terminology.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I obviously I do believe that there's a great place for them. I do notice also though, like in the facilities, like we've got great facilities here in our little town, and they have project managers, and they take them out to wineries, they take them out to museums, they take them out, but so many people don't want to like, and I think that's the more that could be changed. Like if something could inspire them to live every day,
Right.
even if they've got a handicap, even if they've got just to make a decision every morning to engage in every day, to make somebody else smile, to have a belly laugh, to you know what I mean. I think that it's also it's an institutional thing. You're right, because there's some institutions that are way better than others for providing that, and unfortunately, often that's you can access it due to your money. You know how much money you have.
Yeah.
But I'm saying on the individual level, if
Yeah.
people could see this life as a gift, if they could say, okay, I didn't do anything, but I got to be here, like I'm here,
Yeah. But speaking
and
of that, and I know that it's something that is part of the reason that you have been writing these books and all along these lines, and it is very much tragic. I know that many years ago, it's probably almost a couple of decades ago and everything. And unfortunately, their mother has also passed on. But I do remember a gentleman that I knew that was going to one of our private schools. I think Carolina Friends, if I remember correctly, is a Quaker school. But he did choose to take his own life. And I do know that there have been other people that I have known that have chosen to take their own life. And particularly, it is very tragic when it is young people that are doing that. And I do know that, like I said earlier, we even here on the network have a show about bullying. And sometimes it's because of bullying, sometimes it's because of frustration, a sense of not belonging, and a variety of other reasons that folks decide to check out and all along those lines in terms of suicide and all in that space. So I'm just wondering, what is your thoughts? Because you've done some work even in your own life with counseling. I think you just mentioned that your daughter is in counseling, and I do know that it can be very heartbreaking when we hear of students that have, one on one extreme committed suicide, or on the other extreme gone on these horrible attacks where they have taken out a lot of people as well. Because I know that that's happened on school grounds as well, and sometimes it's similar kind of reasoning where they were bullied or they did not have enough of a way of letting people know and release their emotions and their feelings and everything. But I just wanted your take, because definitely during the COVID time, and you mentioned COVID earlier, a lot of people were talking about the uptick in the mental health crisis within our young people, in particularly in the Western society.
Yeah, yeah. It's why I wrote the book. Like, it's that little girl who was 13 couldn't even say I like myself.
Yeah.
She couldn't even say I want to live. And I, as a school counselor, I dealt with a lot of kids who had that kind of suicidal ideation. And I would say, I would first ask them their religious beliefs. Like, what do you believe is going to happen tomorrow if you make that choice today? And even asking the question stopped them in their tracks, because they hadn't really had that thought.
Right.
Like, what would tomorrow look like? And I was dealing with one little person, and she said, "Well, it's all over. It'd be just all over." And so she didn't have any particularly religious belief. And I said, "Well, you're 16 years old. What's the rush? Don't you want to do something before you decide to take your life? Isn't there somewhere you'd like to go, or somebody you'd like to see?" And I and she's still alive. This is 25 years later. She's still alive. And I had a number of students who were saving money, working odd jobs to go to Paris or go to Argentina or go to the Mardi Gras, because during the tumultuous years, like teenage years, are tough on kids. Like, they got hormones, they got peer pressure, they got any number of things coming at them. And you need to give them something to look forward to, in my opinion. Like, you know, in this one case, this little girl just wanted to call her quits, but she always wanted to see the Eiffel Tower. And you don't argue with a kid and say, well, you shouldn't or you couldn't or anything. You just say, well, why not do that first? Why not go to the Eiffel Tower first? And by the time they get to the Eiffel Tower, they've got through that time, and they've become a happy member of society in many cases.
Yeah. Is
That's
it part of
hard. It's hard though. It's hard.
It is hard, and I wonder if part of the problem isn't that they see so much broken families. Because I know that the divorce rate, I'm pretty sure it's the same in Canada. I know it is here in the United States, is ridiculously high, and all along those lines. So I sometimes wonder, do they not see enough positivity? Because I do know that my brother works with kids that have gone through gangs and other kind of situations. Some would call them project kids and things along those lines, but some of them are not necessarily in the projects. It can even be from middle class neighborhoods that got involved in gangs. But sometimes they're getting involved in that because they are looking for a sense of belonging that they are not finding in their home environment. So they are trying to create a family that does not always exist and everything. So I just wanted your take on that as a counselor, because I do sometimes think that some of the frustration is that they don't have the role models that they need.
Well, uh, I became a single mom when my youngest was 6, and my daughter was 6, and my boy was 11 when my husband fell in love with someone else, and so we became a little unit. Uh, I don't particularly like the word broken family. We had to navigate our lives as a uh, one parent family,
Mhm.
but like I do believe that if you can generate times where you're having fun together as a family, like I was single mom teaching English and like, but we had lots of time. Like I was just really, I just needed to have fun times with my kids.
Yeah.
And I also had to make time to listen to them when they were going through the hard spots. And
And
I like we're really tight even now. Like they're both married and have children, but you can do it.
but in that same space, because like I said, I mentioned to you earlier, and I definitely said on this show before that I don't have any kids of my own, but I have definitely got uh, friends' children. I've got my 2 nephews, and I would argue that I am probably a mentor toward many. And I think it was Hillary Clinton. It might have been somebody else that came up with that whole notion. Could have even been Michelle. Now that I'm thinking about it, Michelle. Obama and everything, but it's this the whole notion of it takes a village to raise a child, and I am definitely a believer in that because, like I said, I'm not the only one that is still single, even in my early 60s, and having friends in their 50s that are still in that single space. But we will uh, definitely, give advice to children that are younger than us, and even the children of friends of ours and everything. But I do know that sometimes people in society are afraid to speak out, even when they see things being done because they're afraid that the parents, if they are not in their circle, will kind of snap back at them. And I'm sure you saw that as a teacher. And then there are afraid people that are afraid of the consequences of speaking out, even if they're speaking out as something as simple as saggy pants or a number of other things that can be simple things that can be corrected. But I just wondering your thoughts about that because I do know, like I said, I'm glad that I am, and even have people that tell me, you're like Uncle Mark or something like that, are that I have been in their lives ever since they were young people and everything. And I've had other friends, including some that have gone into the ancestral grounds, that have had similar kind of impact on people in their lives. So, how important do you think it is for the village to help raise our children?
I think it's completely important because if you don't have the village, you have the internet.
Right.
And social media has its perks. I mean, I can talk to my brother when he's visiting in East Asia on FaceTime, but it's also got the pitfalls, the perks and the pitfalls. And the village is real contact, human contact, and I think it's vitally important. And people like you who don't necessarily have their own children are really important in a community. You know, with your wisdom and your experience and your sense of laughter and curiosity. So I believe 100% with you. Bullying, the reason I wrote My Magical Nightmare was because it was for anti bullying. Because, like, it started out as nightmares that when a child has a nightmare, and they can change the ending. And I kind of realized how you can uh, imagine is by using your senses.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a kid in grade 8 who was being bullied, not because he did anything wrong. I think he was a bit overweight, and so he became a target. And he was quite down in the dumps. And I said, well, what's the most powerful animal you can think of?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, I think that a cougar, I think a cougar would be what I would think. A black leopard, a black panther. Sorry, I finally remembered it. He said, panther, a black panther.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, so its color's black. And I said, if you shut your eyes, tell me what color his eyes are. And he said, they're green. I said, what does the fur feel underneath your fingers? He said, oh, it's really soft. And I got him to use his senses, his smell, taste, touch, and so on, till he actually could imagine that panther beside him. And I said, and that panther is the most courageous, strong animal you can think of. And he said, yeah. So I asked him to just open his eyes. And I said, when you're walking down the hallways of the school, I want you to imagine that that black panther is invisible to everybody else, but he's right beside you,
Yeah.
right beside you. You know, that kid was never bullied again.
Oh, well.
Because it's the energy that the kid puts out. It's you're either a victim or you're or else or you're not a victim. And if you can, like I say, cultivate courage, get the kid to identify with a very courageous aspect. I mean, it could be a transformer or a Power Ranger or they can identify with one of an angel or guide, whatever it is that they can resonate with that's there to protect them.
Right.
It gives them a different energy. And if a child is has carrying that energy, they're not targets. Bullies don't like strong targets. They don't like powerful targets. They want the weak ones.
Yeah.
And
They
so,
definitely-
I mean, I think that you've probably told stories to young ones to help them through situations like that, and you just do it organically. You don't need a counselor's office. You just say, "Gee, you know, maybe you could try this," and look how you can maybe. I mean, you read stories of how a friendly person on the street stops a child and looks at them and says, "How's your day?"
Right.
And that kid decides not to do what they were planning to do, and that's a lot.
Yeah. That's
So,
very true and everything. Just really quickly, because my mother was a guidance counselor as well when I was a youngster, and I don't know that everybody understands the importance of guidance counselors, even though they are very important. And I've definitely got other friends that have been in the teaching field, including some that have dealt with guidance counselors. And like I said, this was much at a much younger age, because mom probably would have been her 20s when she was a guidance counselor, but she definitely has a love of education and a support of education, even though she, before retiring, went into the media field, and then after the media field into the nonprofit foundation world and all along those lines. But even in those environments, she did work in education, and now that she's retired, she still serves on a couple of boards, or at least one board. I think she still may have membership in, and all in that space. But definitely education has always been an important part of her life, and I think that you would argue that guidance counselors have been important as well. So if you just speak a little bit to the importance of guidance counselors to our youngsters, because I don't know that everybody understands their importance.
well, I think that guidance counselors can be a safe port in the storm for a kid. I think that often in schools, the guidance counselors' role is diminished because very often kids are sent to the guidance counselor for disciplinary reasons. A teacher sends the kid to the guidance counselor or the parent or the principal. And I think in those cases, I'm better off to go for a walk with a kid and say, hey, do you want to go for a walk outside and just walk and talk? Because I find that the role of the counselors is becoming increasingly restricted by the, having to write everything down, everything said, everything, all the labels and so on. I mean, I have to be truthful, Mark. I found it kind of frustrating because you'd just be getting into something with a child and the bell would ring and off they'd go. Very often they were there against their will, which is not a good starting place.
Right.
Like the woman, this little girl who inspired I Am Amazing, was sent to me on a Monday morning after she had made a serious threat to her life on the weekend. And she was sent in to talk to me. And she was so not ready, and so I kind of wish that the school could form a relationship with people in the community and have it off-site. Because again, there's a real hesitation on a kid's part to go to the counselor,
Mhm.
because it implies that something's wrong. And very often there's nothing particularly wrong. They just need to have a safe port to talk to and sort things out in their lives. But like I agree with your mom that they are important. However, I think that they could become way more effective if they were given uh, a spot that's not on site. That's just my experience. I worked in that for the last for 10 years of my career.
Yeah, that makes sense and everything. Just really quickly, like I said, got about another 10, 15 minutes to go, anything. But I was just wondering, one of the things that we talk about on this show and a number of other shows as well is this notion of the imposter syndrome. And I was just wondering, is that something that you ever had to face? Because you are a prolific writer, and it definitely sounds like you've written a pretty amount of both children's books as well as some scholarly kind of things as well and everything. Maybe not up to the level of Isaac Asimov. I was actually teaching a filmmaker friend of mine who was also a prolific writer, because Isaac Asimov, when he was living, wrote like some ridiculous amount of books. I think it was like probably close to multiple hundreds, if not thousands, and everything. But I just wondering how much of a imposter syndrome that you have in your own life, or that inner critic kind of conversation, because that's something we've talked about on a number of shows here on the network. And I just wonder how much did the inner critic play in your own life?
Well, not so much in the writing.
Mhm.
Just because, like, I never ever thought of writing a children's book. It never occurred to me. But then after that event in the counseling office and my subsequent conversation with my son about isn't she amazing, I went next door and it's like that book tumbled into me. I don't know what you catch. What was that expression? You catch the muse or something, and it just with no thought on my part, it tumbled in. I am amazing. We are amazing. Life is amazing. Like a skeleton, like a number of affirmations. And so I never thought it was my book.
Mm.
I always that series I've always thought was something that I caught the muse or whatever the word is.
Yeah.
And the other two books were totally inspired by my grandchildren. So
Mhm.
again, I don't have any inner critic about that. I mean, it took me how many 14 years to write the Five Little Children's book. That's like what 1,500 words.
Yeah.
14 years, like so. I mean, I had that whole thing of cutting because that's a major part of writing.
Right.
When I started writing Life is Amazing, I had volumes about how a little caterpillar can go into a cocoon and turn into a butterfly and how all those things. But I had to cut it all and get down to the grassroots of Life is Amazing because it has the ups and downs and it forces us to grow. And the last stanzas are life offers us choice. This may be the key because we can choose how to act and decide who to be.
Mm.
As paths stretch before us, we choose those we take, and our characters form through decisions we make. We can be the heroes in the stories we write. We can grow strength and courage to shine forth our light. We can be amazing. It's our choice every day. We can make the world better in our own unique way. Let's give back to life, showing thanks for this chance. Thanks for it all. Thanks for the dance. And that's more like even when the world is chaotic as it is now, even though it seems like the sky is falling, we have to always go back to what are what are the lessons we're learning? What are the joys we can find if we learn? Like our perception is our reality, so we have to learn how to change our perception and quit listening to media that is just putting us into wormholes. And we have to mindfully see how what a gift this life is. I keep coming back to that.
No, that's
I see
definitely,
that as a gift.
yeah, that's totally a gift and everything. Along those same lines, because you kind of alluded to it a couple of times and everything, how important are affirmations to you, and what are some of the affirmations that you try to live by? I know that I have a couple of things that are on my refrigerator wall, but they're not necessarily affirmations, even though I think my dad had some affirmations on his and everything. And I do know people that constantly put affirmations on their different workspaces. I do have a Buddhist kind of like cloth that has a message of affirmation that is actually on the wall right behind this computer and everything. But how important are affirmations to you, and what are some of the important affirmations that you try to bring out? And I actually got that from like a gift shop, because I'm not, like I said, I'm more spiritual than religious, and definitely I'm not a practicing Buddhist, just like I'm not a practicing necessarily Christian or anything. But the message, which is basically a message of hope and all that the earth gives us, is kind of what that message is, as I recall it and everything. But I just wonder, what are some of the affirmations that you live by?
So what are you reading? What does it say?
Hold on one second, because I'd have to recite it, and I don't have the glasses on. Otherwise, I would recite it. But if you hold on one second, I'll actually go off camera, and I'll tell you, because I'll get up in a second and be off camera. But I will also recite. I thought that I was reciting it, and I realized I was on mute and everything. So sorry about that. Let me give it back to you again. The
Okay.
paradox of our age: we have bigger houses, but smaller families; more conveniences, but less time. We have more degrees, but less sense; more relationships, but less judgment; more experts, but less, but I mean, more experts, but more problems; more medicines, but less healthiness. But we have been all the way to the moon and back. We have trouble crossing the street to meet the new neighbor. We built more computers to hold more information, to produce more copies than ever, but have less communication. We have become long on quantity, but short on quality. There are there are uh, times of fast foods, but slow digestion; tall men, but short character; steep profits, but shallow relationships. It's time. There is much in the window, but nothing in the room. His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. So that was what the quote says and everything. So that's kind of the message that was on that cloth that I picked up at a gift shop. And it's called The Paradox of Our Age.
Yeah, I think that he also wrote that we spend our lives making changing our time for wealth,
Mhm.
and then when we get illnesses, we have to change our wealth and use our wealth to regain our health. You know,
Right.
I think it was the Dalai Lama. He's got many. I mean,
Mhm.
I learned about affirmations when I came here because I was unemployed.
Mm.
And a friend taught me a technique called conscious languaging, where you say affirmations with emotion 3 times a day, and you reprogram your brain. And I had to say, I am working as a teacher, making X number of dollars. I have achieved my goal of making X number of dollars teaching. I create a better world and you just repeat it. And I did it religiously. I put it up by my mirror and I said it. And the key is to say it with emotion, because your memory is right beside your emotional center. And so it drives it home. And I got a call from the school board asking me to work, which was crazy. So I have used affirmations. Oddly enough, when I can't sleep, I just recite my books because they're kind of like little prayers, and they make me feel better somehow, you know. So I'd like, but I really respect what the Dalai Lama has said. He's also got calendars with an affirmation every day or an affirmation every day. So I think they're important because a positive affirmation carries a frequency, and that frequency can harmonize with you,
Yeah.
you know, and make your days better, I guess.
Yeah, it can definitely make your days better. And all along those lines, there's no doubt about that. So definitely that's what it's about, is trying to create positive images and positivity in general and all along those lines. And I don't know that we do enough of that in the society. And we definitely got to work on improving that and all along those lines. Um, for those people that are thinking about writing a book, whether it's a children's book or any book in general, what advice would you give to aspiring writers, particularly those that are thinking they want to create something for children's books and everything? Because even when I was thinking about children's books, I remember as a youngster there were certain books that I enjoyed reading. As I did have the Dr. Seuss, or at least some of the Dr. Seuss collection. I'm not saying I had all of them because there were quite a few of them and everything, but I also remember having a few of them. I think I had Green Eggs and Ham. In fact, I'm pretty sure I definitely had that book. And I also remember having Curious George and was a big fan of Curious George and all in that space. And I might have even had a Paddington Bear book as well. But I just wondered, what were some of the children's books that inspired you, and what advice would you give to others that are thinking about writing a children's book?
Well, inspiring books. I mean, I was raised with Burgess books and A. Milne, you know, Winnie the Pooh,
Yeah.
and when I had my own little jiggers, the Toad and Frog books and Rabbit Rug. There's so many titles that when you read your story to a child, it really, you can tell when it kind of hits them and stuff, and it brings you together as the reader and the listener. As far as it comes with writing, if you want to write a book, I say do it,
Yep.
but don't write it as a product. Write it as a process. If you, because there's a very difference. If I write a book in order to sell it, you're actually putting something kind of limiting on that. Write a book with your passion, because you believe in what you're saying, and whether the book sells or not is really secondary. I mean,
But speaking of writing a book with passion and everything, some of the greatest books, and even some of the greatest children's books, I know definitely here in the United States, but I think even in Europe and other places, sometimes the books can be problematic because they touch on some very touchy subjects. I know that there are some people that are not the biggest fans of either Brer Rabbit, because definitely that had some slave narrative within it, and there's like there are not some people that are the biggest fans of Tom Sawyer, because that definitely had some slave narrative. And I know that there are even some children's books that people have tried to put a kind of religious or anti-religious theme on as well, because I do know that there have been some folks that have been upset when certain kind of characters have appeared in books, whether that's LGBT characters or other kinds of characters. And there have been some books, including some children's books, that have been banned in the West for a variety of reasons. So I just wondered your take on that, particularly when there are some people that are wanting to get rid of some books that to me seem like they would be very basic books. I'm sure that there might even be some people, and I'm not saying this is the case because I don't know this for a fact, but there might even be some people that want to ban Winnie the Pooh because Winnie the Pooh was having honey. And we do know that sometimes people are very much into animal protection and other kind of protections as well. So there might even be somebody out there that's kind of like, how dare Winnie the Pooh want to get some money and all in that, even though that was part of the storyline.
it like I'm 75. You know, you when you start censoring everything, I mean, if it's made to be hurtful,
Right.
well then, yeah, I don't think that's good. But I think of To Kill a Mockingbird. I always taught To Kill a Mockingbird,
Mhm.
and Gregory Peck did a fine performance of that. And they talk about niggers, but if you read the book, it is to expose the treatment of the society at that time.
Right.
And the main protagonist was a Negro who
Right.
was falsely accused. And it has a powerful message.
Yes.
And that book is being censored.
Mhm.
And I think, whoa, like the students that I taught really learned so much. I mean, that was a word that was used of that time. And you have to teach books in the context of the time rather than saying no, no. I mean, I read somewhere that they're trying to censor Animal Farm, Brave New World, Fahrenheit 454,
Right.
and all of those books are somewhat prophetic
Mhm.
and really thought provoking.
Oh yeah, there's some great thought-provoking books. I mean, there is a book that what I remember reading that became a movie. Some people would say that we are heading into what the book was talking about. I hope not, because it was not a pleasant book for the fair sex and for women along those lines. But I have some friends of mine, including some female activists, that are afraid that we are heading toward Handmaid's Tales, and that might have been a more prophetic book than we would like it to be, and all along those lines. So I agree, there are books out there that can be overly prophetic, because I do have some friends of mine that have been like, wait a minute, if you think about it, we're not that far from what they were talking about in terms of forced segregation and some other things that were within that, and the patriarchy trying to maintain its last foothold and all in that space. But yeah, there are definitely some friends of mine in that space that are like, oh, we might be getting a little bit too close to that being a reality.
Yeah. And we need to have conversations about it. Like, and when you censor conversations,
Mhm.
then you're running into a really big pitfall
Yeah.
in our lives because you have to allow people to see the pros and cons of anything.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to be happening with this
Mhm.
polarization. What you brought up the polarization again, and we need to start creating bridges. In my belief, the bridges have to start being created because right now our society is, united we stand, divided we fall, and we're not united the way we have to be. We're one species. It's hard to believe that we are only one species. You know,
Yeah.
and the sooner we get it that we come in different colors, shapes, and sizes, but we have the same innate desire to love and belong, and to have fun and to do the best we can. And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Censorship. I think I can understand. Not subjecting little kids to certain levels of uh, TV or stuff, but I do not like this whole censorship because it doesn't go with the current narrative in society.
No,
You
I
know,
definitely agree with you. It doesn't go with the current narrative at all.
yeah. So yeah, I don't like that myself.
Yeah, same here. Well, this has been another fascinating conversation. I'm going to see if I can find that book really quickly. But while I'm looking for that book, one of the things I get all my guests to do, so I'm going to get off camera while I look for that book and everything. The one that I said IBC wrote, and he sent me a couple of them and everything. If you can share how you can be reached, any messages that you didn't get out on this one, that you didn't get out on the last one, and also a message of positivity, because that's something I try to do, particularly on this show and on the online dinner party, which is my Wednesday show, which have my guests, whether it's a single one as it was with you today and as it was with the filmmaker last week, or and also any message of positivity that you want to share for our global network, because I definitely Pod TV is part of a global network that Nick and Kim Calhoun and some of their business partners put together, and I'm glad to be part of it as well. So I'll get off screen, and like I said, I'll try to find that picture so I can show it to you before we totally get off and everything. But any message of positivity and anything that you want to share that we haven't got to, and all along those lines. But as always, it's always fascinating talking to you.
Well, I truly believe that life is amazing and we can do this. If we get together and see what we have in common and not focus on what is different, I think that we can create a better world for everybody, for ourselves and everybody. And I hope that everybody can start to see that the influences of Chicken Little have to be diminished in our lives so that we don't buy into fear so very quickly. So, all the best to everybody. Thank you. My website is amazingbooks.ca. Um, and you can reach me at info@amazingbooks.ca. And I am selling my books on amazon.ca. So that's that's it. Thank you so much for the invitation.
No, I greatly appreciate it. I couldn't find the book, so I'll have to send it to you. And the next time I see you on a show, I'll see if I can't get a copy of it. But yes, IPC did some great things with the Funky Eye Puppets, and I know that he's got this whole collection of books that he is putting together. And I was hoping that I could find it, but unfortunately, that was too short a notice, and it was not able to be found that quickly and everything. But the next time I see you, I'll try to have the book with me, or maybe I'll send you an email with it with the title and everything. But I have thoroughly enjoyed our time together. We'll get out with the same robot that brought us in and everything, and maybe one or two little brief commercials, including one about can do spices and everything. But as always, it's been a fun conversation, and I hope folks got some great insight. And yes, I definitely know that there are too many people that are doing that Chicken Little kind of mindsets. I'm glad you brought that up as well and everything. But as always, it's been fun having this conversation, and hopefully we'll see you back in the near future.
Thanks, Mark. I really appreciate it. Nice talking to you.
Good talking to you as well.
Bye-bye.
You know how people love to enjoy food and don't understand how to flavor their food or how to replicate a meal? They're interested in supplements but don't know where to begin? Well, what I do is I take the guesswork out of enjoying flavor and wellness with my flavorful spice blends so that they can create delicious meals with healing benefits. Can Do Spice was created to help cooks at any level enjoy healing through food. Every spice blend was designed to give added health benefits of natural herbs. Every blend is complete. There's no need to add any additional spice for a delicious meal. Saving you time and money while adding supplements to your meals can be both tasty and fun. My earliest memories in the kitchen began with my father, Kenny Can Do Bond, so it was fitting that I would name this line after him. I have always looked to natural remedies to supplement the body, and I found myself hiding herbs and minerals in foods for my family. That's when it hit me. Everyone needs Can Do Spice. Everyone should be having this.
The only trick you need to save time and money is to shop at Aldi. Aldi.
You know how people love to enjoy food and don't understand how to flavor their food or how to replicate a meal? They're interested in supplements but don't know where to begin? Well, what I do is I take the guesswork out of enjoying flavor and wellness with my flavorful spice blends so that they can create delicious meals with healing benefits. Can Do Spice was created to help cooks at any level enjoy healing through food. Every spice blend was designed to give added health benefits of natural herbs. Every blend is complete. There's no need to add any additional spice for a delicious meal. Saving you time and money while adding supplements to your meals can be both tasty and fun. My earliest memories in the kitchen began with my father, Kenny Can Do Bond, so it was fitting that I would name this line after him. I have always looked to natural remedies to supplement the body, and I found myself hiding herbs and minerals in foods for my family. That's when it hit me. Everyone needs Can Do Spice. Everyone should be having this. It's an exclusive brand for cooks at any level who want to create flavorful dishes with healing benefits that can satisfy the body and soul. Add a little spice to your life. Give Can Do Spice a try.
The only trick you need to save time and money is to shop at Aldi. Aldi. Shop differently. Limitless length plus volume. Sensational from every angle. New Lash Sensational Sky High Mascara. Only from Maybelline, New York. Everything that touches your baby should be this comforting. Pampers Swaddlers. The #1 choice of hospitals is 2 times softer. All right, Trivago. Find me a hotel somewhere in Thailand where I can wake up with a view of the ocean. Awesome. The future. It's impossible to see. And when it's finally here, it might not be what you'd expect. It might just be better. Introducing Luxury Electric. Introducing Lucid Air. We're for those who love to discover, who don't need to travel to find something new, and who know when you spend less, you can discover even more at TJ Maxx and Marshalls. Smooth, velvety chocolate wrapped in precious gold. Ferrero Rocher.
One of the things that business owners forget a lot is to prepare for their own retirement.
Hi, my name's Nick Palavita, and today I'm with a very special guest, a certified financial planner, a chartered retirement plan specialist, and president of National Pension Partners, Max Couliet. Max, tell me what you do at National Pension Partners.
Well, Nick, we help successful small businesses and professionals put together retirement plans that provide them the maximum retirement benefits and big tax deductions at the same time.
Well, how do you do this?
Well, we get on an internet conferencing system with the client. We review their goals, what they want to accomplish, and then put together strategies to help them in implementing a retirement plan that benefits them, not everybody else.
Well, that sounds really good, but how much does this cost?
Well, it's really not bad because the first consultation is free. That allows us to go through and discover whether this strategy works for that business and for you as the business owner, and helping you maximize your retirement.
Well, Max, how do we get this free appointment?
It's really pretty simple, Nick. You can either go to our website below or call us at 877-252-1692, and then we can set up a time with either myself, Nick, or one of our other retirement plan specialists, another CPA or advisor in the office, to go over this with you and make sure it fits for you.
Hi, my name is Lewis Haupt. I work with National Pension Partners, and I work with businesses to allow them to put the maximum away that they can for themselves and to save taxes.
Hi, I'm Brad Coyle, and I'm the brokerage manager at National Pension Partners. We're always analyzing plan fund choices in order to ensure the participant's success.
If you want more information on how we can help you and your business put more money away in a retirement plan than you ever thought possible, contact us at the website below or call us at 877-252-1692.